start talking a little bit about blood. We'll get your practicals back once I'm done with the lecture. We'll let you guys know. I have a key over there by the sink so you guys can check your answers, make sure I didn't accidentally take points off or anything like that. Today we're going to be dealing with blood, and blood's a really important topic, really no matter who you are, no matter what you're going to be looking at. We're going to look at data about blood, whether it's the hemoglobin concentration or the hematocrit or the oxygen carrying levels, spiron O2, all this stuff. It's all going to be related to what this suspension does. And so blood, first of all, when you describe it, yeah, okay, it's a liquid, and it's also a fluid. So liquid describes its chemical state. Fluid describes its physical state. So the fact that it flows from high pressure to low pressure, that kind of thing, refers to it being a fluid. So in healthcare, we actually kind of misuse the term fluid. Like when we think of bodily fluids, we actually mean bodily liquids. Because air is a fluid too, actually. Not a liquid though, it's a gas. So it behaves like a fluid. So when you read in textbooks, or maybe the next time you're in a physiology course or a hematology course, when they say fluid, they're actually describing how that stuff behaves. And so we'll talk a lot more about the fluid properties of blood when we get to blood vessels, and we do some blood pressure tests and things like that. But today we're really looking at the cellular anatomy of blood. So what you're looking at here are red blood cells, which I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with. They are actually not technically cells because they're just sacs of hemoglobin floating around. They have no nucleus. That's what makes them really easy to pick out, is that as opposed to every other cell in your body that has a developed nucleus, like these white blood cells here, red blood cells don't. And they're red because of the hemoglobin, so they actually have their own color to them. The majority of the color in human bodies is due to the combination of melanin and red blood cells, like we talked about in the skin, right? So if you're a lighter complexion, the red blood will actually contribute more to what you look like. So that's how you'll tell when if I blush or something like that very easily because I don't have that much melanin in my skin. And so blood can be very important for looking at its particular redness. The color of blood changes, so like a pulse oximeter, I'm sure many of you have seen the little thing you put on your finger, and it tells you the concentration, the percent saturation is actually what it tells you, of oxygen in the blood, and it does that just by a small change in color. So hemoglobin will actually change color based on whether or not oxygen is bound to it. So that's just kind of a cool property that makes it easy to measure. Now, how many of you guys watched the video that was on the website? Sweet. So that video went over the individual cells in detail in terms of the things that you're going to want to pick out with each cell. So what I'm going to talk about now, I'm going to go over the cells, remind you of a couple key things, but for the most part this week is made up of three big components. There's the histology, where you're picking out basically 5 different cells, so every microscope question next week is a multiple choice with 5 answers, potentially. One of those 5 leukocytes, or white blood cells. And so the details are in the video, and I'll kind of walk around the room and make sure you guys understand everything, but I'm not going to lecture directly about the histology right now. Instead, what I really want to talk about are hematological tests as well as blood typing, because those are the other 2 big categories. So there's histology this week, there are blood tests, which I'm going to go through each one of them right now, and then there's blood typing and transfusion concepts that kind of go together. Basically answering the questions like, I have an AB positive blood type. Number 1, you need to know what that means, and we'll talk about that too. And also try to figure out from the blood type who can receive I'm AB positive, that's why I always use that example. So basically, who can I give blood to, and then who can I get blood from? So you got to be able to think about that concept both in donation and receiving. And so we'll end this talk with that concept. I'll give you a little drawing that I use that I think really helps people figure out and organize their thoughts and solve these kinds of problems pretty quickly. But first, let's talk about blood tests, because these are really relevant and kind of interesting to tease out the specific